you have the ability to take any questions or comments that come? No, I did not. Not doing that anymore. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the West Fargo City Commission meeting for May 17th. I'd ask that you please join me for a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The first order of business is to approve the agenda as distributed. Is there any questions or additions? I would call to the attention of consent agenda item G has been pulled for further review and for additional information. Again, consent agenda item G.
I move to approve.
Nope, number 12.
There's one more.
Number 12.
Excuse me. And item number 12 on the regular agenda, a request for approval of the commission to work with the city attorney to enter into an encroachment agreement. That has been requested by Mr. Graham to be pulled this evening as he couldn't be with us. So item 12 of the regular agenda, item G of the consent agenda.
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner George. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the agenda as distributed with the two changes. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Next order of business is the approval of the minutes of May 3rd, 2021.
I'll move to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Jurdevig seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of May 3rd, 2021 as distributed. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next order of business is E, the building permit. Building permits report has been distributed. Is there any additions, corrections, or questions of planning and zoning on the building permit report?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Jurdevig. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Olson seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the building permit report as distributed. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. The next order is the consent agenda. It has items A through O. Again, reminding you that item G has been pulled from the consent agenda.
I'll move to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner George seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda with the one item G being stricken from it. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Moving on to the regular agenda. Item number 1. We have with us this evening as a guest is Shannon Full, the President and CEO of the Fargo, Moorhead, West Fargo Chamber of Commerce. Good evening. Welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Commission members. Thanks for the opportunity to be here. My name is Shannon Full. I'm the new president of the Fargo, Moorhead, West Fargo Chamber of Commerce. I started the position on December 1st and just wanted an opportunity to introduce myself. I'm also a resident here of your great city, living in the Rivers Bend area. So welcomed my family here from the Minneapolis region to take the role with the Chamber, and just wanted to first thank you for your tremendous partnership that you have had, not only with the Chamber, but with the Economic Development Corporation as we look to fueling our future. This is a tremendous initiative by this community, and I will tell you, it was one of the greatest draws for me coming to this area. Coming out of the Minneapolis area, it was very fragmented and very bifurcated as it related to multiple different organizations, but also a lack and a void of regionalism, which you are demonstrating in your leadership here. So I want to first thank you for that. Tell you a little bit about my background. I've had the great pleasure of leading a chamber or economic development organization for 21 years. Have done so in the Minneapolis region, but also in Melbourne, Florida, in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, in Appleton, Wisconsin, and then back to the Twin Cities before coming here. I will tell you that the communities in the region that myself and my family have been thriving in have been regions that have been this size, regions that can come together for the benefit of the entire kind of the state, the kind of area that we're looking at. I'm very, very passionate about public-private partnerships. In every chamber that I've had in the past, we've had partnership agreements between the city and the chamber. Things like talent and workforce agreements or business retention and expansion visits, opportunities for us to really identify where do we leverage relationships and resources to the best of our ability. And so just know that I'm very heartfelt in saying we look forward to partnership opportunities with all of you. I also wanted to share with you just a couple of the cornerstones or kind of the direction of where we're taking the chamber now going forward. The first is all around business excellence. So as you know, we are a business organization. We have about 1,950 businesses that are members. Of that number, over 70% of those have 15 employees or less. So small business excellence, small business programming is very, very important to us. So we're looking, for instance, actively right now with SCORE to look at how do we leverage the benefits that they have in helping to get more mentoring and advice out there to businesses. We have a very active business training program that gives us lots of tactical, practical training for our members. I also come with a pretty different philosophy around I really want us to demonstrate the value of the organization. So we are opening up many of our events and programs to non-members. We want them to experience the opportunity for growth and prosperity. Our entire mission is very simple. We want to be a catalyst for growth and prosperity and do that through active partnerships. So the small business component of this and business excellence component is very, very important for us going forward. So we're going to look for additional opportunities to engage. The next cornerstone is really around public policy. I have my Vice President of Public Policy, Katie Mestel, with me today. We have a very tremendous team as it relates to our entire staff. But Katie especially has done a tremendous job at both state levels. So we obviously have North Dakota and Minnesota as we do state policy, and also a significant amount of federal policy. So I would also implore you to look at if there are areas that we can help to support the city as it relates to issues or opportunities for us to expand as a region. Please don't hesitate to call on us in that regard as well. And then we really do want to be as active as possible with all of you as a resource as it relates to if we've got opportunities or messages, communications to get out to the businesses, please use us in that regard. We're happy to partner with you in that regard as well. So we'll be very active in public policy as we continue to go forward. And then the final piece, I would say the final cornerstone of the chamber, and one that is really the reason, I think one of the major reasons I was brought into the region is because for the last 7 to 10 years, I've really focused on talent and workforce. My first 60 days here, I did over 125 face-to-face visits with businesses. Without a doubt, all of them but 2 businesses, no matter what the size, no matter what the type of business, said their number one issue was their inability or their challenge around attracting, retaining, and developing talent. So we know that has to be a multi-pronged approach. We have to get really serious about what is our regional brand, how do we target markets outside of the region to bring talent into the region, but also how do we retain more of that talent here. So a couple of initiatives. These are things that a major one called the Ignite Initiative. You'll hear much more about this in the future, but this was a very innovative workforce solution that we actually are we went to Fueling Our Future to request some funds, but essentially what's going to happen is we're going to have a strategy that has a very active technology platform that we've already had all of the school districts in the region, so the West Fargo School District, but also Fargo, Moorhead, Central Cass, Northern Cass, have signed letters of intent to utilize this new platform in their school district. In addition to that, the platform can also be used for our colleges. All 5 colleges have agreed on a letter of intent, as well as our active job seekers. So we want to provide more resources to those that are new immigrants and refugee populations, recently released incarcerated, disabled populations, dislocated workers. So essentially this platform is going to have about 1,000 different video career cards that can be explored, attached to average salary, local schools that provide training for this. But the other part that it's going to do is it's going to identify businesses at no cost to the business, so we really want to make sure any business can access this platform, but they create a profile and then they identify, would they be willing to speak in a classroom, speak to a group of job seekers, job shadows, internships, tours, site visits, those types of things. So we're creating a more seamless connection between those looking for work and those that have work available. So as I mentioned, you'll hear a lot more about it, along with metrics. We've set up significant metrics around utilization and outcomes, but that is a piece that's being funded by Fueling Our Future. So again, I want to thank you for your investment in that initiative, and we look forward to going forward in the future, partnering with you. The other thing that I really pride myself on is transparency, so very open door policy and a very open approach, a very significant commitment to building relationships. So I would welcome the opportunity, if any of you are wanting to do a one-on-one introduction and meeting to find out a little bit more of where we're going, please reach out to me. Katie's actually going to put both of our business cards, she'll give them over here to the clerks, and by all means, we would love to have you reach out, and I look forward to that opportunity. But more than anything, thank you for the opportunity to be here this evening. Thanks for the partnership and for your tremendous work up here as elected officials. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Mrs. Hull. Thank you. At the invitation of Mrs. Full, Katie is here also, the public policy advisor, and you'd have a great opportunity to attend a public policy meeting tomorrow morning at 7:30 a.m. Katie is hosting Senator Ray Holmberg, the chairman of the Senate Appropriations Committee, and he's going to give a summary, and that is both in person and virtually, but that will be an interesting summary. And then also Darren from the Moorhead Development is going to be talking about Moorhead. But it might be very interesting to hear what Senator Holmberg, head of Senate Appropriations, has to say about the last legislative session. So with that, next order of business is item number 2, is the second reading of Lot 3, Block 1 of Dakota Territory 10th Edition, rezoning from a PUD, Planned Urban Unit Development, to a public facilities. We have with us this evening Mrs. Sankey, planner, City of West Fargo.
Thank you, Mayor Dardis and Commissioners. Nothing has changed since the first reading and public hearing that was held on May 3rd. This is rezoning for the new fire station site. I'm available to answer any questions, and this is a second reading on the rezoning.
Thank you, Mrs. Sankey. Commissioners, any additional questions regarding this? Okay. This is an actionable item. We're looking for approval of the second reading.
Make a motion to approve second reading.
Thank you. Commissioner Simmons moves. Commissioner Olson seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the second reading of Lot 3, Block 1 of Dakota Territory 10th Edition, rezoning from a planned unit development to public facilities. Is there any further discussion, Commissioners? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Next order of business is item number 3. This also is going to be presented by Mrs. Sankey. Second reading zoning ordinance amendment to the sections 4-434, downtown mixed use, and 4-435, entertainment mixed use. Please, Mrs. Sankey.
Thank you. Again, nothing has changed since the first reading and public hearing that was held on April 5th. This is the second reading on the zoning ordinance amendments. As mentioned, I'm available to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions? Commissioners?
I'll move to approve.
Commissioner Olson moves. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Jurdevig seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the second reading of the zoning ordinance amendment to sections 4-434 of the downtown mixed use and 4-435 entertainment mixed use district. Is there any further discussion? Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item number 4 is also going to be presented by Mrs. Sankey. Second reading, zoning ordinance amendment to section 4-302 of city ordinances, replacement of the official zoning map. Lisa?
Thank you. You may recall 3 properties were inadvertently missed during the last time the map was updated. Nothing's changed since the public hearing and first reading at the May 3rd meeting. I'm available to answer any questions.
Questions, Commissioners?
Make a motion to approve?
Thank you, Commissioner George. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Jurdevig. It's been moved and seconded to approve. Second reading. The zoning ordinance amendment to section 4-302 of the city ordinance replacement of the official zoning map. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item number 5 is the second reading and the final plat approval of the Wilds 21st edition. Mr. Peterson, planner, City of West Fargo.
Thank you, Mr. Commission President. The Wilds 21st edition has gone before the City Commission for its first reading at the December 21st, 2020 meeting. To summarize, the applicant is proposing 322 single-family residential lots, 2 medium-density residential lots, and some additional lots for park and retention. The continued pace of residential development in the city leads staff to believe that the absorption rate will accommodate the additional lots, and the engineering department is considering a phased approach to improvements. The city engineering department has completed a traffic study for 52nd Avenue West and 9th Street West related to the continued growth within the Wilds. Growth assumptions are being realized rapidly within this area, as all lots are currently platted within the Wilds south of 52nd have been committed, and building permit activity is extremely strong. With the addition of the last phase of development south of 52nd, the improvements recommended in the study should be strongly considered, and staff would recommend quick action to avoid delays and inconvenience at a later date when build-out is soon realized. Within the city's jurisdiction, the study recommends short-term solutions at 9th Street and 52nd intersection, a roundabout study at 52nd Avenue and County Highway 17 South Cheyenne Street, short-term recommendations for capacity study on County Highway 17 South, and the postponement of a roundabout at 64th Avenue and County Highway 17 South have been sent to the Fargo-Moorhead Metro Council of Governments for review. Midterm solutions, including upgrading 52nd Avenue West to a 3-lane section with shared use paths and a capacity increase at the 52nd Avenue County Highway 17 South Cheyenne Street roundabout. There are some timing-related issues on the plat that also pertain to the improvement district that staff will be addressing within the subdivision improvement agreement. Of note within these is that until proper U.S. Army Corps of Engineer permitting is completed, that the city would withhold building permits on lots 1 through 87, Block 1. The agreement will also need to address lots 1 and 2, Block 1, to ensure adequate turnaround for emergency and city services, until which time the road extends into the undeveloped lot to the north. Staff is upholding its recommendation to approve the Wilds 21st edition with an added recommendation condition that an improvement district be considered for intersection improvements at 52nd Avenue West and 9th Street West. The recommended conditions of the staff report will ensure the necessary items laid out in the staff report will be met and addressed where necessary in a subdivision improvement agreement. The traffic impact study has been included in this packet for review. Staff is recommending holding the second reading and approving of the final plat.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Are there any questions, Commissioners?
I do. Mr. Peterson, by doing this, are we holding up some development out there by moving this forward?
I don't believe so, but I will refer that to Dustin, the city engineer. He knows more about the traffic study than I do. I believe we did slow down development in order to do the traffic study originally, but by approving this tonight, I don't believe we are.
Is that accurate, Mr. Scott?
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. So, just so I understand the question, you're asking if what we're doing is delaying any development activities?
Well, I know that a few months back, the study itself was holding up some development out there in reference to why we even needed to do the study when we knew, obviously, a new development, you're gonna have a lot more traffic, and we found that out, correct? So what I'm asking you now is, I'm reading here, it talks about, improvements district, the staff, and it talks about withholding building permits for lots 1 through 87 of Block 1. I'm wondering what that is in reference to.
Okay, yep, so I understand that a little better now. So just a little recap. The developer petitioned for improvements back in February, which the City Commission accepted. In the past few months, we've been working on understanding the nature of all of those improvements that need to take place out here. The traffic study was a component, but we didn't hold up the process specifically for just the traffic study. There's been a lot of work to be done. As it relates to that particular comment, I can't verify the exact lots, but I know that there are a few lots that are being proposed to be included within the improvement district that I'll talk about in the next item, in which they're going to be held up because of the Corps of Engineers permitting that we'll need to do any of the work in the backyards along the diversion. And so I think what the Planning Department is addressing within their staff report is we will not issue a building permit until those improvements are complete. So all of the remaining development that they've requested will be done, but there'll be a block or two here or there that will not quite be ready for a building permit.
It says in here, lots 1 through 87 of Block 1. I can't imagine, that doesn't mean 86 homes or 80, does it, or 80 lots within one block? Are there that many, I would imagine?
Oh, I will.
If you look at the map,
Yeah.
Lot 1 and 2 is way up on the north end where the undeveloped, where the trees are. As you move down there, I'm part of the review committee, Mark, so that's why I know this. And those lots are at the request of the developer, is we're gonna hold back on that
Okay.
until, this is not a city precipitated thing. This is by the developer asking that, because the way they have to backfill the lots for drainage up against the diversion dike, they wanna do it all at once.
Okay, and I'm fine with that. My whole point was I don't want to hold up development, obviously, so I'm fine if that's what you want.
But it would be the Corps of Engineers that's holding it up because of their permitting, not our traffic study.
Right,
There-
well, right.
There is a permitting process, but also the developer has requested it this way.
Yep.
Correct, sir? We'll let this gentleman speak.
John Eunice, Eagle Ridge. I think Dustin did a great job explaining it. I would say just a small little caveat. It says lots 1 through 87. It's actually just the lots that are backing up to the diversion. That block actually wraps around in a few locations, so it wouldn't be all of those. And we have requested the entire ditch along the diversion to be filled, and that is in process. So we don't think there's going to be really any carryover where there's going to be improved lots that can't be built on, because just the timing of the core process in conjunction with the timing of the improvement requests, I think it should all work out just fine.
The permitting from the Corps of Engineers could take months. That would slow this down, so that's why the developers have requested various
Okay.
phases in this. So, to the contrary of your comment, the city's doing everything they can to accommodate, to move it forward.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions of Mr. Peterson? Again, this is an actionable item to approve the second reading and final plat approval.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Jurdevig seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the second reading and the final plat approval of the Wilds 21st edition as presented this evening by Mr. Peterson. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Item number 6, in Improvement District number 1337, Wilds 21st Edition. Mr. Scott, City Engineer for the City of West Fargo. This is to create an improvement district, approve an engineer's report, and to direct the engineer to prepare plans and specifications. Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Commission President Dardis and members of the Commission. So, we kind of got into the discussion a little bit with this last item when we, with the plat here. So tonight, we're at a point now where we are ready to formally create an improvement district. As I mentioned during the last item, developer submitted a petition requesting the city to install infrastructure into this Wilds 21st Edition area. When we received those requests, we stepped back and we analyzed what exactly is going to be appropriate and necessary to adequately service the area, along with the appropriate timing, phasing, and all that good stuff. It so happens that in this area too, we also not only were we looking at the specific improvements to service the area, but what type of regional traffic impacts do we need to consider. So there was also a traffic study done, which again we just talked through in the previous item here. So there is a lot of content in this particular packet that was intentional. More Engineering conducted a feasibility study. Again, we didn't want to put our blinders on and only look to the specific areas in the 21st edition. As we all know, the 21st edition is just another stepping stone in this multi-phase development. The entire area, of course, south of 52nd Avenue includes several lots. I know there's a graphic that shows how many lots there are. I'm going to probably skip that. I'm going to get down into some of the other graphics here to help explain as I talk through. But again, their feasibility study didn't just look at the local improvements of the 21st edition. It looked at how do we accommodate all of the remaining regional improvements and the timing, the additional phasing that'll take place in the future, which have not been requested. So here, this particular map shows this area. So the Wilds 21st edition is down in this corner. The improvement district, as you can see though, is going to include the other existing and future neighborhoods south of 52nd Avenue, all a part of the Wilds. Again, we're trying to understand what is remaining to do out here. That's where their feasibility study touched on all of these components, including the anticipated improvements at the 52nd and 9th Avenue, 52nd Avenue, 9th Street intersection. So again, there's a lot going on. The improvement district and engineer's report that is before you tonight, however, is very specific to the first couple phases that the developer has requested be serviced. And again, that's demonstrated in this box here that has a red hatch, this grayed out box here that has a yellow hatch, and of course we also highlighted the work to be done along the diversion that requires the Corps of Engineers permitting, grayed out area with the blue hatch. Those are the areas where the primary work will take place for District 1337, and we also are estimating $250,000 for intersection improvements here. We don't know exactly what that is yet, but we're earmarking $250,000 within this engineer's report so that it is a part of the cost estimate. So getting back up to the summary sheet, again, there's quite a bit of content in here. I'm going to get to the page. Again, focusing on what is included with this District 1337. So as it states in here, More Engineering study evaluated the entire development. However, Improvement District 1337 and the corresponding engineer's report are very specific to a portion of the Wilds 21st Edition, as well as necessary regional infrastructure. So again, there will be local infrastructure to service those areas in the Wilds 21st Edition. There will be regional improvements made that will benefit the entire neighborhood south of 52nd Avenue. Included in this packet is the engineer's report prepared by our Assistant City Engineer, Jerry Wallace. As you can see here, indicating the general nature and scope of the improvements, the purpose, the feasibility, and then it gets to the cost estimate. As you can see, our estimated total project cost at this point is $7,250,000. There will be, we have yet to determine the exact amount, but there will be a portion of this project paid for through Casserole Water, as they own and maintain the water infrastructure. By an agreement that we'll execute, we will install that infrastructure, however, Casserole Water will finance it. So after our engineer's report is, of course, more engineering study. I'm not going to go through all of that. You've had that in your packet to review. I think with where we're at right now, I will pause and answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Mr. Scott? When one takes a look at, right on your financial analysis, the project will be funded with special assessments. Will those special assessments be to these 320, whatever Malachi said earlier, 322, or will that be also some of the other housing to the east of there, in the 19th and 20th Wilds? Will there be some additional assessments coming to those folks?
Yes, there will. Yep, so that's where when I go back to that map that I had a few minutes ago, you can see right here, this black dashed line here represents the improvement district boundary. So everybody within this district boundary at this point could receive an assessment. Until we have the final plans done, we won't know exactly how much that's going to be for everyone, but the district is including everyone because we know that there are some level of regional improvements to be done out here. For example, relating to storm sewer, retention ponds, so on and so forth, that benefit everybody here. The bulk of the assessments will, of course, be where the local improvements take place, the sewer, water, streets, out in front of residential homes.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. That's exactly what I wanted you to clarify for the public that's watching this evening and or attending this evening, is that I think it's very important to understand that there'll be different levels of assessment that's going to take place here based on benefit. And that'll be, those discussions and notifications will be at a later date.
Absolutely. Yep, and there is another map here. Again, there's the legends that help follow this map along, but in the blue boundary here, we're trying to identify the areas that are local improvements. There's a red boundary identifying the improvements on 11th Street that'll take place. That'll be assessed out to a very specific group of properties. The blue or the green boundary in here is specific to sanitary sewer work. And of course, the yellow boundary and black dashed line here represent the regional improvements. And there is a description of how each of these components are proposed to be spread. But again, this process does not take place until after construction. We're just trying to, again, provide as much information as we can at this stage.
Thank you for your explanation and the delineation of those benefits and how they may affect those taxpayers. Well done. Anyone else have any questions? Mr. Scott? Again,
I'll make a motion to create Improvement District 1337.
Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Simmons seconds. It's been moved and seconded to create an improvement district number 1337, Wilds 21st Edition, as presented this evening by City Engineer Mr. Scott, and create an improvement district, approve the engineer's report, direct the engineer to prepare plans and specifications. It's been moved and it's been seconded. Is there any further discussion regarding the Improvement District 1337? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Passes on a 4-to-1 vote in the affirmative. Item number 7, business remodel addition exemption. Ms. Lauren Orchard, Economic Development Director for the City of West Fargo. Good evening, Ms. Orchard.
Thank you, Commission President Dardis, and good evening, Commissioners. This evening, I'm reporting on the Economic Development Department's research into the remodeling exemption for commercial properties that was requested at your February 16th meeting. As you know, this remodeling exemption has been in place since the early 70s, and applications have been reviewed and processed through the assessing department since its inception. But due to its incentive-like nature, our department has taken on the responsibility of researching its history and functionality in West Fargo and how we compare to similar communities throughout the state. Based on this research and feedback from the Economic Development Advisory Committee, we have also developed a draft recommendation for your consideration tonight. So to begin our review of the remodeling exemption, I would first like to speak briefly about the program's history through the state of North Dakota. The state created the program in 1973 because at the time, legislators believed that new investment in older properties, specifically through rehabilitation and remodeling, was disincentivized by existing methods of assessment and taxation. This in turn caused properties to decay, need repairs, need to modernize or replace what was currently there, and the legislators believed that that reduced the overall tax base. So with that in mind, legislators believed that it was in the public interest to encourage investment of private capital through the remodeling exemption to improve buildings that will increase the production of wealth, volume of employment, quality of living conditions, and increase the property tax base. So this program overall was created to be an alternative to other property tax exemptions that were not directly encouraging improvements to existing buildings. The state guidelines, which provide a structure to the exemption, were last reviewed and updated by the state in July of 2007, and that update does inform the rest of the slides that we have about the state program requirements. So the state has 4 main requirements. The city must first pass a resolution to allow the exemption, which the City of West Fargo did back in the 70s. The city may limit or impose certain conditions on the exemption, which include the term of the incentive, which cannot surpass the 5-year term limit set by the state. The city can also set geographic limitations to where the exemption can be used. The types of improvements that are eligible, such as an addition, can be restricted further by the city as well. And the exemption must follow the property and does not terminate upon the sale or exchange of the property. The city may also rescind or amend the exemption at any time, and our city currently has a moratorium since your February meeting. So here we have state guidelines for qualifying improvements. To improve the value of a property, the applicant can complete the following. The state has designated 4 types of improvements that any applicant can do to their building to qualify. The first being renovation, which is restoring the building to a previous condition or to a good state of repair. Remodeling, which is essentially changing the building to make it functional again. Altering the building, which could be a complete redesign of the internal, and additions. But the hitch with the additions is that it cannot be a separate building. The state does not allow that. It must be attached to the building. The state also says that any commercial property can qualify for the exemption, and there is no age requirement like there is for residential structures, unless the city sets its own age requirement. If a commercial property is being transformed into a residential property, it must be at least 25 years old to meet that residential requirement set by the state. But residential properties, if they're being converted into a commercial property, they can be of any age. Also, the state outlines some non-qualifying improvements. Any improvements that began before the governing body, so the City of West Fargo, passed the resolution. So if you did this improvement back in the 60s, for example, that could not qualify. Completely replacing one building with another also doesn't qualify, so you can't just demolish an old building and build a new one. And like I said before, you can't complete a new addition that is not attached to the building and qualify. It must be attached to the building. The state also has procedures that it sets within its guidelines, and this is what they say. First, the property owner must file an application with the city assessor, which in part, because of these guidelines, that's why it's always been in our assessing department. The assessor then needs to determine if the improvements qualify based on what the city has put in its own guidelines and based on state guidelines that we just reviewed. The city commission then needs to approve of the application. Then the last assessment on the building will remain for the prescribed period, and then the exemption is in effect beginning with the first assessment date following the date of commencement for making those improvements. So if you were to start your improvements in June, you wouldn't qualify until the following February when it's assessed again. So here we have West Fargo guidelines before the moratorium was put on the exemption. The city voted back in, I can't quite remember when it was updated, but at the very beginning, the city of West Fargo put a limit that any new improvement needed to be at least $50,000 in increased valuation to the property. But then that was reduced down to $45,000. So currently as we sit, if we didn't change the guidelines, any new improvements must exceed $45,000 to an increase in true and full value to qualify for a 5-year exemption. This is not necessarily the expense that was spent to create that improvement. Please keep in mind that that is the valuation, not the actual expense. We also put in here that residential improvements of $25,000 or more in true and full value qualify for 5 years, and residential improvements of less than $25,000 in true and full value qualifies for 3 years. So we do have additional requirements for those residential properties. But again, I'm just presenting on the commercial side. Commercial properties must also complete an application for property tax incentives for new and expanding businesses. That's that form that you see when we present pilots in front of you. So they fill that out as well, which tells us generally how many jobs they might be creating. But jobs are not really related to the state guidelines at all. So that's a summary of West Fargo guidelines. And we did want to put here on the screen recipients that we have on record. So when our assessor, Nick Lee, took over the program, he started religiously tracking those applicants, and so we do have that data in front of us. Any before Nick Lee was hired, we're not completely certain of, but that doesn't mean we haven't had more successful applicants. So you'll see in front of you that we have some good variety of who has applied for this incentive, but it has been limited. And if you recall, some of the more recent ones, Bobcat did receive this incentive, and I believe the amount of improvement they put into their building because of receiving this incentive was just over $1.4 million. So that's just one example of one of our successful applicants. We also did do some research into other communities that have this program and have different limitations. And I don't want to go too much in depth, but you'll see here that there's great variety in this as well. So something to note here too, we did call Grand Forks today. We finally did get a hold of them. So in this chart that was in your packet, we had shown that they just followed state guidelines, which we just reviewed, but they actually have a minimum requirement just like we do, where we have to invest $45,000 in a new building, but theirs is much lower. It's actually $5,000. And actually, their program, they send out letters to pretty much anyone that does a remodel or expansion and invites them to apply. So that's a very different approach than we've had. Really, in our community, someone needs to approach us and ask for the exemption. They need to know about it. But in Grand Forks, they get a mailing. I also believe Fargo functions in a very similar way, where they send out or even call someone that they know has done a remodel that might qualify, and they say, hey, there's this program, you should apply. West Fargo, though, we make sure that the applicant shows us that they They need this exemption before they actually go and build, so they have to do that application beforehand before they actually improve their property. And I'm more than happy to come back to this, but another thing to note here is that Fargo has a tiered system, and they have geographic limitations to where they'll offer it. They also have age limitations, which we do not currently have in our program. And then Mandan was interesting. They basically allow all improvements, but they cap it at a 3-year exemption, and they mandate that applicants install 1 automatic door. So, every community is a little bit different, and we are similar to Grand Forks in our requirement for a minimum investment in the building, but other than them, we couldn't find anyone else that has that requirement. So again, everybody's a little different. So we did bring this to the Economic Development Advisory Committee, and we talked for quite a while, so I'm happy to discuss, we went back and forth on a number of these items. We ended up not having a quorum by the end of the meeting because we took so long talking through everything. But they did ask that I bring it back to the City Commission because they thought that you would be the best advisors on this program. So what we had come up with by the end of that meeting was asking that buildings be 10 years old or plus to qualify. We don't currently have an age limit. As I'm sure you all can appreciate, we don't have a lot of older structures in the community. So we didn't want to make that requirement too high, but we did think that the spirit of why this was created was to rehabilitate older structures or add on to them. So we wanted to reflect that, but they really did go back and forth between how much should be required and did want your advice on that as well. We would really like to have all types of improvements allowed by the state still qualify. We do believe that all of those qualifying improvements would benefit the community, and we do want to incentivize that. We would also like that all applicants apply before construction begins. As I just reviewed, some other communities don't require that. They even send out those mailings or call people who might qualify. We really would prefer that that applicant knows about the program, we advertise that program, and then if they won't be able to do the improvement without it, then they contact us. So we would prefer to keep that as part of our process as well. We'd also recommend doing a pre-approval by the City Commission. We do not currently have that. So the way it has worked and the way the state has outlined it in their guidelines, our city assessing department has been able to just look at the resolution, say this is what the commission has directed us to do, and they approve it conditionally, and then once the improvements are done and they know the actual value, they come back to the City Commission. But what we can do instead is when I get the application, I bring it to you for approval, and then they proceed, which is how we handle all other types of incentives. So that is something else we can do as well. But our Economic Development Advisory Committee did want to bring up to this commission that with that, there becomes an inconvenience to the applicant and an extension of time that they have to wait. So the way it has been functioning is very convenient for applicants because they have less of a rigmarole to go through, and it can speed up development. So they did want to bring that to your attention, and they weren't hard and set in that rule. Then we had also heard back from the commission at your February meeting that there was some concern with the limitations of how much should be invested and if there should be a cap. And so we discussed that at length as well. What we would recommend is that we offer a 3-year exemption for $50,000 or more in improvement. Between that and $250,000 in true and full value improvement. And so we can have a tiered system in that way, and then after $250,000 in improvement, offer that 5-year exemption. So really incentivizing people to invest more into their buildings by offering a level up, if you will, in that exemption process. And then we did talk at length about a cap to the exemption. They would like you to recognize that if we do cap the exemption, we may be disincentivizing higher value properties. But they did recommend that if there is a cap, that we cap it at $1 million. So if you remember that Bobcat exemption, it did go over that $1 million, and that was a very important incentive to have to keep Bobcat here. And they all recognized that and wanted to make sure this commission understood that if we do cap it, we may be limiting those types of investments in our community. But if you would like an exemption, they recommended $1 million. So with that, I'd open it up for questions. I'm happy to answer anything.
Commissioner George?
I have a few things. So this proposal, did you say this is strictly commercial, this proposal?
Correct, yes.
Okay,
I only
and would you be coming back to us with a residential proposal?
that is up to you as the city commission. I would be more comfortable with that continuing to be housed in the assessing department's purview because my position is more focused on commercial development. But if you would like my department to look into it, we certainly can.
Okay. I guess from my point of view, I would still like to see a residential portion, and I don't care who does it, but I would like to see that brought as well. Also, I guess this is just my opinion. I feel like these guidelines, maybe we don't necessarily need to bring them through approval for the commission every time if we approve these guidelines, with the exception of maybe a higher exemption. If we decide we did want to do a higher one, like the Bobcat situation, then maybe something like that would need to go to commission. That's just my opinion on this.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Jurdovic?
So if property owner has retail space in this town that they're leasing out, one of the common things that they do when they lease space is have some type of fit-up allowance, right? So they're going to invest as part of getting a tenant to sign a lease, they're going to put in a $50,000 fit-up allowance. Will those expenses qualify then to lock in their assessed value?
That depends on, sure.
What if that same tenant signs up for an enterprise grant and we're actually paying for part of the investment that then locks in their assessed value of their building? I can see some complexity there that we're not quite covering here.
Well, we certainly haven't run into a situation like that. I think we could continue to reduce that risk because if we were to have certain requirements that would make that harder to happen, for example, having an age requirement. If we were to have just built a new building, they would not qualify for a remodeling exemption, for example, if we set that age requirement. So that might be a way of limiting it.
For the enterprise grants?
So let's say there was a new development and a developer built a brand new building. Well, based on these guidelines we have in front of us, they wouldn't qualify. But if you're asking about just the fact of layering it, I don't know why we would, it's using the same money, so that would be difficult to incentivize.
Yeah, and I liked what you said about the need-based component. I just don't see that in what's written, or in the presentation. But if there is a need-based component, then I'm less concerned about it, because if they're doing a fit-up allowance as part of a lease, I'm not sure that's a need-based investment that they're making, because they're getting a benefit out of it.
Okay.
Commissioner Jurdovic's first part of his question is a great question and very valid, because in the historical information that you shared with us, all of these businesses were doing the improvement for themselves. But the question you're asking is if somebody's going to lease this to someone else. So that might be part of the information of to correct that. They're not qualifying for both grants. Mrs. Fisk has a point.
Thank you, President Dardis. I was just going to add to what you were talking about and what Lauren was saying. This exemption only applies for expansion or remodel. If a building's never been fit up, it's not a remodel.
Right, but I could own a space that I have a tenant in today. The tenant moves out, new tenant's going to move in, I'm remodeling the space and fitting it up for their needs, and then that is a remodel. And in that case, I could be a 10-year-old building, and they could apply for an enterprise grant, and so we could be incentivizing kind of from multiple directions here, and I just don't see where we're capturing the what-if scenario around that.
What I would say with our process, Commissioner Jurdovic, is that you would know about that when it was happening, and you would be able to vote it down, or vote to approve it if you wanted to double incentivize because it makes the project happen. So, and because both of those would need to be presented based on these recommendations before the development occurs. I think there is a risk of that happening if I don't come before you and present it as part of the process.
Agreed.
Commissioner Simmons.
Thank you. Lauren, what caught my attention, I couldn't hear everything you were saying. You were talking about taking longer, in other words, more red tape, and you mentioned you were concerned. So please, if we go by this, you're saying that there's a concern that it would take longer to this
Sure.
business to get up and running?
Right. So thank you, Commissioner Simmons, for that question. So typically for an incentive, any type of incentive that we have, the processing time is between 2 and 3 months. And that is because we have to present to the Economic Development Advisory Committee, we have to present to the City Commission. Things like pilots may require that we publish in the paper for a public hearing, things like that. And so a lot of our incentives take 2 to 3 months. So this incentive, what has been convenient about it is that Nick has been able to process them without appearing before the City Commission until it has been completed, because he already had the guidelines that he could go off of. Now, if we now require that I come to Economic Development Advisory Committee and the City Commission before they are able to build, that will fit in with that same timeline of 2 to 3 months. Whereas before, it could have been expedited. They could have started building right after Nick processed the application. So that's what I was mentioning.
Sarcastically, I would say that's what city government does. We make people wait. That's our job in life.
Right.
But in all honesty, I agree with that statement. I mean, we shouldn't be holding up process either. I mean, because of a technicality. I mean, if it's something, that it should come in front of us, or like Commissioner George said, if it's already something that's documented and already in the in the documentation, there's probably no reason to come in front of us.
Sure. And
unless it's a butler or it's a bobcat, Mayor, or if it's something that I have been involved with that was a lot of money, but boy, it sure made sense.
Sure. And perhaps to answer Commissioner Jurdovig's comment before, what we could do in the guidelines to help facilitate that faster process is we could say cannot be layered with an enterprise grant, for example, unless approved expressly by the Commission. We could put that in the guidelines, which would allow us to still process it quickly, and if we did have a situation where they needed both, I could come before you and you could approve it.
Commissioner Olson.
I just want to make a comment or a question. So we would be approving tax exemptions with just letting the city assessor do that. Would we want to know about that before it happens? Because we're,
Yeah, I'm not saying either way.
I know, I just want to make that point. If it's
Yeah.
all handled in the assessor's office, we won't see it until, and we're gonna have to answer to the public as to, oh boy, they just added on all this stuff and now their value went up this much and we're not increasing the
Correct.
tax.
Maybe there's another,
So-
maybe there's another option is what I'm,
Right.
if we can't do that, I'm sure, Lauren, there's another option we can.
Like you said, like with this first one, 3-year exemption between 50 and 250, that's a relatively small exemption, and something like that is one where I see, we already approved it, I don't necessarily need to see that or slow it down, go through the red tape, but if it's bigger, then for sure.
But I will remind you that the reason we're having this discussion is Mr. Lee, our city assessor, processed this as the policies and procedures that are within the city of West Fargo, and he shared, was it 5, Nick? How many of them came forward about a month or two ago? Well, there was a number of them, and because of, Commissioner Simmons is the veteran up here, there were a number of us that had never seen that processed in that manner before. And that's the new commissioners raised the question, I think I did it, as to how this process gets this far along without the city commission having any oversight whatsoever. And of course, that's all the great legwork that Ms. Orchard has done now, understanding us to understand the state guidelines and things. It is just something this commission, 4 of us, had not processed before. And so I thought that was very unusual that we would be giving exemptions of these dollar amounts without some type of oversight. Again, granted, the city assessor's office had complete oversight on this and followed the procedures and process. But it's still tax dollars that are being, not being collected. So that's why we went to this, as to whether or not there should be another process or a discussion. Commissioner Jurdovig and then Commissioner Jurdovig.
I'll just say from my perspective, given the relatively small number of these that I think we get, I would personally like them to come to the commission on the commercial side. I mean, and if all of a sudden we start getting a lot of them and we need to programmatically make a more efficient process, but most of these businesses are, you know, a 2 to 3 month, they're planning for this for more than 2 to 3 months before Bobcat remodels a building, for example. And I don't think that is a huge obstacle, and I guess I would like to, I don't want to programmatically give away incentives. I would much rather be in on the decision.
I agree.
So.
Wholeheartedly. So,
How do we
and-
feel about there's no residential portion on that?
Well,
I would agree with you. I would love for the residential one to come forward, because I actually have concerns that, you know, I could put a new door in my house and lock in my assessed value for 5 years because it says under 20, or for 3 years because it'd be under $25,000. I mean, just based off the simple rule that I understand it to be, and maybe I'm missing some fine print in there, but, you know, I could make a pretty small improvement to my home and lock in my value for 3 years.
There's more to it than that there.
Like I said,
Not that
I might be missing some fine print, but at least that's how it's been presented to me.
I'm a little, there are other programs through Gate City Bank and low interest loans for folks to remodel. Obviously, there's an age that the house has to be so many years old, but there are, that, you know, we have other programs and incentives. I would call again to the attention of the commissioners on your building, your monthly building report, building remodels. 44 in 2020 is all there were, COVID, okay? So far, in 2021, we've dealt with 71. And with all due respect, you know, I agree with you on it coming before the commission, but you're gonna have 71 remodels on residentials coming forward? That's not accurate.
They may not all apply.
They don't all apply for that, Mayor. We're gonna go on Apple.
Well, there's the potential.
No, there's not, because let's speak up a little bit here, folks. There are some criteria on this. You don't just get to come and say, I'm gonna put a new door on, or a new carpet, or, I mean, I went through the process and there is some criteria you gotta meet. At least our old assessor sure said that, and so, unless things have changed.
10 years old.
There's very minimal criteria. It's all about value add, it's not about investment. That's one thing, and the low end is very low. That's kind of one of the issues I've brought forth in our meetings, and with the residential, we're not, as the assessor's office, advocates or opposition to that. We're kind of waiting to see how this went, and then dealing with the new planning director, because there's some talk that the planning might kind of take this one and advocate for that, because they kind of did that grant through Bill Bank or whatever, loans for old houses thing. But no, there's very little. You could put a value out of $1,000 and get it for 3 years.
So,
New door.
so let me ask you this, because a few years back, I have a 1968 home.
Okay?
And when our old assessor was here, I put a new roof on, I put a new air conditioner, I put a new heating unit in, and new carpet, and I didn't qualify for anything. So there's a reason why I didn't, correct? Is it a value based? Is it?
Yeah, it's based on the value that they added. If they didn't think that added
So there is
any
criteria, is
value?
what I'm saying. You just can't go, there is some criteria. I think you.
Right, the criteria is that we have to add value of any kind, you know, and to hit the fit-ups, you know, if it's fit up once and you're going from a retail to retail, we don't add any value typically for those kind of things, you know, once it's fit up initially. If it's a more intense use, such as a restaurant or a hospital or something like that, we'll add some value, but just to put your mind at ease at that. But yeah, there is,
So on a home, sorry to interrupt, but and again, I wasn't doing this to get this, I was doing it to check how the system works, but, so on a home, from my understanding, there's kind of like three sections. There's poor condition, fair condition, and good condition. And if you fall within that good condition, it's very difficult to add more value to your home. So when you come to put a new door on, that's not adding any more value to your home. You're not going to get the exemption. That's what I'm trying to say.
and
Does that make sense?
That's what I was
So,
gonna bring up.
Right,
it's
right.
not,
Changing out a door.
replacing
seems like-
equal and stuff, if you're in a poor and you're adding a bunch of stuff, then yeah, we're gonna add some value, but if you...
Well, we want
don't
them to do that
Right.
in that area.
You don't like your vinyl siding color and you add new vinyl siding, we're not gonna add any value, and you can spend $30,000. But I'm saying, that's why I say it's the value that we add because of the project. And that was also one of the considerations when we used to have this guidelines, you know, they were pass-fail kind of thing, so we'd meet them and then we'd bring it to you and we knew how much the value was gonna be for it, so you could see it. But however you guys wanna handle this, it's gonna be handled by Lauren, so I will have very little to do with it, so.
One more question, Mayor. Sorry to interrupt you, but I think that we have to, first thing we have to do is we have to define. We have the business section, the commercial. That's in itself. Then we have the residential. I don't think we should even be talking the residential tonight. That should come back at a different time, whether through planning, through whoever it is, Lauren. Tonight should be just about the business section. Sorry,
Agree.
I'm done.
Ms. Orchard, with the input that you got here, would you suggest that you take this back and visit with the EDC advisory?
Thank you,
Committee,
Commissioner President Dardis. They asked that I bring this to you for more feedback on these policy recommendations. If you would like to send it back to them, you're more than welcome to do so. Just for my own clarity, I would ask what you would want to hear back from them, so that we can direct that conversation a little bit more. But I also told them that I would offer the ability to vote on it tonight to you, and they were perfectly happy with that. So it really is up to the Commission whether or not you would like us to mull over it even more, if you have specific questions for us to address, or if you would like to approve it this evening.
Commissioner Olson.
What Commissioner Simmons brought up was a good thing, the good, or the poor, the fair,
And
the good. Is that set already, you know, would we be able to see like the actual form that they have to complete before, you know, we've got the proposal here, but what's the actual
We certainly could
print
do
and
that.
all that kinds of stuff?
We certainly
What
could
are we
provide
actually
that.
approving, and does that building fit that poor category or a good category, and you know, things like that?
Sure. I'm not quite sure how we would put on the form what you just described about poor, fair, good, because from our perspective, it's all about increasing property value, no matter how you do it. But we could certainly go back to the EDAC with a form for them to review and bring that back to you, if that's how you would prefer it to be handled.
I don't know, just something I thought of when you mentioned it, Mark. Does the businesses need to meet that as compared to, you know?
I think there's a difference
I
between
think there is too, but
business
it's
and
just something that...
residential.
Absolutely.
I don't think they go, I don't think they go poor, fair, and good on the commercial side than they do on the residential. It's a totally different ballgame.
All right, so Commissioners, we have proposals from Ms. Orchard and her EDC committee. Are we okay with the buildings must be 10 years or older? 10 years old, right?
Yep.
Everybody,
Okay
is
with
that a
that.
consensus?
Yep.
All types of improvements qualify if allowed by state guidelines.
Yeah.
That's a policy that's in place now. We have consensus. Must apply before construction begins. That again is a policy that the city assessor has and it's a state guideline. Consensus there?
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm okay with that as long as we make sure we're getting that information out that the programs exist.
Okay, that's a great comment. Pre-approved by the city commission. Commissioner Jurdovig has spoken to that point.
Can I ask
Please.
a question? So, if this is an incentive, and somebody decides they want to do it because they don't know the program exists, and then find out a year later, so you would want, it's no longer an incentive if they've already done it.
They've already done it.
Right, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying I'm good with must apply before construction begins. I'm okay with that, but I feel like we need to advertise it a little better because most people don't know about it.
Okay, I was
Fair.
Yeah,
maybe drawing
yeah.
an
Because even like my own residential, I just
Yeah.
did a remodel and I didn't even know about the program because I could have applied potentially and didn't even know it existed, so.
Okay, so the pre-approval by city commission, is that a consensus item?
You know, I think no, it's not a consensus, obviously, with me. I think there should be a limit. I mean, I don't think every small one needs to come in front of us.
I actually
my-
agree with you, Mark.
Well, okay, my point is that those are the items that then Ms. Orchard's gonna take back to the EDC. We're not voting on this.
Right.
You
Yep.
follow me? Okay. 3-year exemption between 50,000 and 250,000 increase is true and full value. That's existing.
What is existing right now is that you have to invest at least $50,000 Actually, it's $45,000.
45,000.
So what we would do here instead would be if you invest between if you increase the true and full value between $50,000 and $250,000 in value, then you would get a 3-year exemption. That's new. Before, you would get a full 5-year exemption just for investing for improving the true and full value by $45,000. So that is new.
Lauren, I think it's important to remind the commission too that we're only talking commercial.
Yeah.
We're not talking about,
Yep.
and like you said, the increase in true and full value, if I spend $300,000 and my true and full value goes up 50,000, it's the 50,000. So.
Just because you spend money, that much money, doesn't mean your values of that property is gonna increase by that much.
Right.
Can I ask a question? Thank you. Lauren, so these proposals, you said the committee's asking us to come back and say if we're okay with them, that's true. But these are the proposals that the committee is asking for?
Again, we did not have a quorum when they made these final determinations, but overall, as we were discussing all of them, they were in favor of these points. So it's hard for me to answer that question clearly, but essentially, for the most part, without a quorum, they did like these points, but they did ask me to come back for guidance on them because we had so much back and forth about each and every one of these things.
Okay, so I guess my answer here is, if you were to have the quorum and you were to redo it, I would support what the committee wants, because you're the people that know what you're doing.
I know.
I mean, you know what the process, you know what happens. We shouldn't be up here.
So, okay, good point, Commissioner. Do we want, let's send it back, but there's one more item that we should talk about, and that's a cap exemption.
Yeah.
Is there intent on this, for a commercial, remodel, that we cap it at $1 million?
I feel like there's exceptions.
I would be concerned because of the one I could bring up is Bobcat. When we took that, Bernie, I think you were on NDC at the time, but when we did that process, believe it or not, we were in competition with Shanghai, China, and for their renovating, for their recording there, and we got it, and that would have taken them out of the process completely. And so I don't think, I think there's going to be very limited times, but there may be a time, so I would rather have it come in front of the commission to make that than just say, we cap it at $1 million.
I agree with you.
I recall the discussion, and the city of Moorhead had a $10 million incentive for Bobcat to move to Moorhead.
And we didn't give them that, by the way, but it was,
so,
we needed it.
Lauren, I hope that gives you some feedback to take back to your committee.
Certainly.
And hopefully they'll have a conclusion, that you'll have a quorum and bring it forward again. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
We're not going to vote on this. This is not an actionable item at this time. We're going to direct Ms. Orchard to go back to her Economic Development Advisory Committee and bring it forward again with some of their insight, along with all the great ideas that the Commission had this evening. Moving on. Thank you, Ms. Orchard. Item number 8 is the appointment of the Red River Regional Dispatch Center Board. There's been a lot of discussion going on recently with regard to the Red River Regional Dispatch Center that's crowded for space. Chief Otterness and Chief Fuller both are a part of that discussion, along with their counterparts in Clay County, Moorhead, Cass County, and Fargo, and of course, West Fargo. One of the things that, as we continue to move on, we've run out of space. We're short at least 2 dispatchers at the present time, and with the future number of calls, with how we've expanded our fire department and the like, and what's going on, there's been a shift because our community is growing very quickly. Clay County's not growing all that fast. So now it's a disproportionate amount of calls that are on this side of the river. For example, Cass County, Fargo, and West Fargo. The board makeup has been as such that it's 5 and 5. 5 from the east side of the river, 5 from the west side of the river. In additional discussions with the fact that They're considering possibly selling the dispatch center, possibly building a new dispatch center, and the like. They believe that there should be 2 elected officials on the board, because it's going to involve voting and spending taxpayer dollars. Mrs. Fisk.
Sorry to interrupt you, President Dardis. This particular committee is it's the governance board to work on the building of to work towards the new structure, so they'll still have their intact board, and I'm sure you understand that, but I was afraid that maybe not everybody else understood.
Thank you for that
part of it.
clarification. So the point is that, I've been on this board, and they're asking for a second, elected official from the city of West Fargo. So in the discussions with some of the other folks, what they're normally doing is if they have a portfolio type of city government, the police and fire commissioner would be a logical first choice unless they decline it, and then probably go to finance or something like that. So with that, I'm recommending Commissioner Simmons as carrying the portfolio for fire and police, be the second appointment on this Red River Dispatch Center Board.
Second.
Could I have a motion, please?
I'd make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner George. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Jurdevig seconds. Been moved and seconded to appoint Mark Simmons and Bernie Dardis on the Red River Regional Dispatch Center Board. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item number 9 is the Sidewalk Improvement District number 6056, 2020 sidewalks. Mr. Scott, City Engineer, City of West Fargo. It's adopt a resolution approving the contract and contractor's bond and authorize notice to proceed. Sir.
Thank you, Commissioner President Dardis and members of the Commission. This is really a procedural type item. Last month, you did already award bids to a contractor. This particular item now is approving the contracts that were executed by both the contractor and before the City Commission President can sign. We want the board to review and approve these. So again, more of a procedural type item. Along with the resolution approving contract and contractor's bond, we also have a notice to proceed in here that, again, Commission President Dardis will sign upon the Commission's approval. So with that, I'd answer any questions.
Questions for Mr. Scott?
I'll make the motion to adopt the resolution.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Simmons seconds. It's been moved and seconded to adopt the resolution, approving the contract and contractor's bond and authorize a notice to proceed for the Sidewalk Improvement District number 6056. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Scott. Item number 10 is project number 2260, concrete pavement repair. It's being presented by Mr. Scott, City Engineer, City of West Fargo. Again, to adopt a resolution approving the contract and the contractor's bond and to authorize the notice to proceed. Mr. Scott.
Thank you again, Commission President Dardis and Commissioners. Just like the last item, this is a procedural type process here where we did already award the bids. Now the contracts are being executed. We want the Commission to approve the resolution and authorize a notice to proceed. With that,
Any questions of Mr. Scott?
Make motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner George. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Been moved and seconded to proceed and adopt the resolution approving the contract and contractor's bond and authorize the notice to proceed for project number 2260, which is a concrete pavement repair. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Next order of business is item number 11. And that is GS5 Limited Liability LLC Stockyard Development Phase for 1 district number to be determined. Mr. Scott.
And thank you again, Commission President Dardis and members of the Commission. So here is a petition for improvement submitted by a developer. The developer is, their title of their company is GS5 LLC. Throughout the packet here, you'll see the first thing I wanted to put in here was a reminder just on how this process all works. I'm not going to get into that too much, but you can see here we're with accepting a petition that would put us at the project start. So we're at the very beginning of a project development here. Below that, we have a plat, a proposed plat. This particular development is located just south of Public Works on the south side of 12th Avenue between 9th Street Northwest and the Cheyenne River. Their post plat right now is titled Stockyards First Edition. And here's an aerial overview. We did ask the developer to work with a consulting engineer to prepare a master utility layout. This doesn't necessarily mean the project has been designed by any means, but it gave us a comfort feeling that the property is serviceable. So, again, the next couple sheets here identify that. What the developer is requesting at this point is for the city to move forward with constructing the underground improvements and only return the street back to a gravel section roadway. The developer would like to acknowledge they will maintain that gravel section roadway until it is paved. Some of these things will have to work out within the developer's agreement with the plat and the subdivision improvement agreements. And just like with the Wilds 21st edition, once the commission, or if the commission does choose to accept this petition and direct staff to begin preliminary engineering, our efforts will focus then on what extent of work is going to be needed, how we will phase it, how we will time it, all of that good stuff. So really what we're asking to do today is, based on what the information you have in your packet, is to accept their petition and then more importantly direct staff to begin the preliminary engineering efforts, which would certainly start with a task order with more engineering to get engaged as well. So,
thank you.
With that, I'll answer any questions.
Questions for Mr. Scott? None?
Make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. Is there a second?
Second.
And moved and seconded to accept the petition for improvements for the partnership of GS5 LLC Stockyard Development Phase 1, as presented by Mr. Scott. Is there any further discussion?
I would have one.
Please, Commissioner Jurdovic.
Question. So, if that's assessed back to these properties, do all these individual lots have substantial ability to be developed and therefore a value that, I mean, somebody could just not pay their taxes and it becomes our problem, right? I see a big lagoon on one of these lots, for example.
Absolutely.
Is there a risk that some of these lots are so potentially unvaluable because of something like that it would actually create a financial risk for the city to create an assessment onto that property?
Great question, Commissioner Jurdovic. Yes, that's always a risk with any of these developments and financing with special assessments. I don't know what the extent of the cost will end up being and what those proposed assessments will end up with these improvements, but I will say that I'm not going to sugarcoat that. Yeah, it's certainly a risk. I don't know what the long-term plans are.
That's the lot that I look at this and I'm like, what are they going to do with that? And
they're draining it into our lagoons at this time, right now.
Okay.
Yep.
It's being drained. So could you show the various lots, Mr. Scott, the overall? Okay, there's one of these lots that's not being developed, is West Fargoans has affectionately called Mount Manure for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
That's one that they haven't dealt with. They thought they had a source of which to get rid of that. that fell through. So there's still, that lot is not included in the development. They've already talked to Southeast Water with regard to, the Cheyenne River and a setback from where they can build. The developer's been involved. I've been involved in the preview committee of this, and they've answered a lot of questions with regard to, that's Mount Manure right there, that squiggly line thing.
Well, I mean, and that's why I asked the question. Assessments work because land has enough value that if we end up taking back the property, we can sell it. But if the lot does not have enough value, then we can be stuck with the assessment at the end of the day. And a couple of these pieces that worry me a little bit from a development perspective, that no one might ever want them.
It's a great discussion. The developer has all the confidence in the world. The lead developer in this is a man that's done a lot of things in West Fargo, and he's totally confident that he's going to make this work. But you raise an excellent question. Absolutely, anytime that we put infrastructure into a new development as to what might transpire or the term of how long it might take for it to develop. Absolutely a great question. You know, one of the biggest concerns here was the fact that when we're putting in the infrastructure, the underground infrastructure, we're not doing any streets or anything like that. And they've specifically requested, because of the construction and the work that's going on out there, that they don't want finished streets on this at this time. They want to do crushed concrete that they'll maintain in order for them to develop this in the manner that presents itself in front of them, I guess.
One of the things over the years that I've been here, and this happened just not very far from there, I guess the only name I know is Mosquito Flats.
Mm-hmm.
That land we did some assessments on years ago, and it actually doesn't come back to the city. I believe it goes back to the county first, and then, is that what happened out there? I think it goes to the county. It does. It goes to the county, not to the city. And then we actually, I think, paid $1 for some of that property, and it took a while, but it was reinvested, and we actually sold it again. And so, I mean, that's a risk sometimes you have to take. I know it's not a great risk, but knowing it's only a couple of lots there that I think we could more than make up for down the road, I think it's, if we have, and I understand that that's going to be, somebody's going to complain right away to me, but if we don't take any risks as a city, we wouldn't be anywhere today. We would have not have hit anything south of that interstate. So I always remind people that there is risk in our business as well, and sometimes we have to take a little risk.
All right. Is there any further discussion? We have a motion on the floor to accept the petition for improvements. All right. We'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
It passes on a 3-2 vote, 2 dissenting votes. Again, at the beginning of the meeting, we informed you that item number 12 had been stricken from the agenda, so we move on to number 13, engineers report. Mr. Scott.
Well, thank you once again, Commissioner President Dartis and members of the commission. Not a whole lot to report on. The activities are certainly starting to pick up with the weather. One certainly noticeable project is on 23rd Avenue over by Costco. Work started there last week. They've got some of the panels replaced. Some of the work on the median has already taken place. So that project is progressing nicely. Of course, the paving done on our downtown Cheyenne Street project. That project is moving forward pretty well. And a handful of other projects are certainly underway, so the communications department's doing a great job kicking out the social media updates and keeping the content live on our website, so certainly would refer our residents or anybody else that's interested to go to westfargostreets.com, and there are project information on that. So with that, I would answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Questions for Mr. Scott?
I guess I got one. Okay, so the Costco thing, obviously construction is there, and I've been there a couple times in the last week. Doing that 180 U-turn doesn't work either. Do we have a better plan?
The one thing we did talk about is closing that down so that people can't do a turn there. Right. Unfortunately, the reroute will be to go down a block, and then you have to head all the way south to 26th and come all the way back.
Because what's happening is people are trying to make that turn,
Mhm.
but they're stuck in the middle and they're doing this to try and get turned around. So it's like, we need a
Yep.
better plan.
And I'm certainly willing to, go close that off. It's just, there's not a good detour. I shouldn't say it's,
Well, if you go down to like, what is it, the west side and then
Yep.
come around, that's not bad.
Right,
But
right.
people aren't doing that. It's
yep,
not
some of them are choosing we've also had people driving in through the cones. Now that the median the curb has been poured on the median, that's stopped. But even with the cones out there, people were cutting through the median, and one truck apparently went through, where we had removed pavement. So sometimes you just can't deal with, you can't stop it, but that one, we certainly could put some barriers up there and
If we can direct people,
force people to 6. Yep.
yeah.
I would make the comment before you do anything is you talk to the Costco though, before you just go put barriers up. That's gonna, we have to work with them as well. I mean, I know right now there is a sign in there saying go around the west, and you're right, I didn't do it myself. I didn't, there was a sign already, so you kinda gotta dodge through the
Yeah.
traffic.
I mean, a
but-
little car is fine, but these are the bigger ones. They just can't make that turn.
Well, get rid of that Ford 150.
Any additional questions for Mr. Scott? Thank you, sir.
Absolutely, thank you.
Item number 14 is the city administrator's report. Mrs. Fisk. And, we have a special guest this evening you're gonna start with, I believe.
Commission President, artists, and commissioners, yes, we do. I only have one other item on my report, but I would like to first introduce our new planning director, Megan Elsog. We are very, very excited to have her with us. She is our newest recruit from the City of Fargo, and she's gonna do a fantastic job if she'd want to come up.
Good evening, Megan. Welcome.
Good evening, Commission President and Commissioners. Megan Elshaug. I'm a resident of the City of West Fargo for over 11 years, where I live with my husband Anthony and my daughter Carmen, who's 4 years old. I was most previously at the City of Fargo for 8 years with the recent position of Urban Development Coordinator. So very excited to be here. I've had a great first day and excited to be working for the City of West Fargo.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any commissioners? Welcome.
Welcome.
Good to have you with us.
Thank you.
Alrighty, the only other item that I have under my report is, I was asked through, a citizen's request by the president to give information on what the costs were for the Cheyenne Street downtown home purchase. And it's pretty straightforward. As was already shown, there's $20,000 in appraisal fees that took place. And legal fees came to a total of $11,147.50, plus $900 in abstract fees. So,
What was the last one?
$900 in abstract fees.
Abstract fees.
Yep. And the reason for the legal fees was February 1st, our Economic Development Director, through a positive vote of the Commission, was directed to work on purchase agreements and updating of abstracts and so on and so forth. So she did do that until the Commission changed their vote, and so then we stopped, but the costs were there, so.
So what is the final disposition? I know that we were, at that last meeting, or 2 meetings ago, that there were 2 of the residents that were in, the commission chambers, and they declined. Part of the proposal to them was the appraised prices, and all 5 had to accept our offer because of the contiguous land type of thing. So, all 5 rejected the offers, is that correct? Or 2 of them, how many rejected the offer?
I can't clarify if all 5 did, but per your direction in executive session, we were told that we had to have a unanimous agreement on all 5 properties, or you didn't want to proceed. So at the April 19th meeting, under my administrator's report, I did notify you that not all 5 agreed to take the appraised value, and so therefore the project was done.
Thank you for the clarification on the date.
I
Please, Commissioner Simmons.
Yeah, Tina, I know there was another question with the $3,000 where that was. Obviously, I know that was earnest money, that we put down. We did get that back, correct?
different project, Mark.
Different project.
Oh, is that?
That was a
we
totally
had-
different,
Oh, no.
that's,
Oh, I'm
that's a
sorry. I
different
was thinking-
project, that's okay.
That's a different project.
I'm sorry, I was way off on that one. Okay.
That's
All right.
a sewer storm project.
Stormlight, yep.
That's a part of Seventh Avenue.
Yeah, but I thought.
That 3,000 was.
Okay.
Yep. So, $900 for an abstract, $11,100 for, purchase agreements, legal fees,
Mm-hmm.
$20,000, in assessment fees.
Appraisals. Yep.
Appraisals, excuse me.
Yep.
Terrible choice of words on my part.
That's all right. Okay, do you have any other questions
on
of me?
Any of that? All right, thank you. Anything
Thank you.
else for us?
No, I do not. Thank
Do you have any
very much.
correspondence with us?
Nope, not today, I don't.
Commissioners, do you have any non-agenda items? Departments heads, staff, any non-agenda items that you'd like to bring forward? Okay, Mr. Simmons.
I'll move to adjourn.
Mr. Olson.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to adjourn the May 17th West Fargo City Commission. We are adjourned.